For my brethren, I agree that we strive to unite our efforts and let us fire our hearts with the idea of vindicating our country. Many nations are on our side. On the last day of the present month at noon, we shall be able to raise all at once, and in case our enemies are aware of it, start doing so openly. Remember also that as soon as Spaniards are aware of our being here, they will order an arrest of our friends. Perhaps we shall never find an occasion so propitious as this. Therefore, we must take an advantage, or otherwise it would be a great pity if we don't endure to end the war as soon as possible. Win over the native infantry, taking the measures you deem best. Guard you many years. He was expecting enforcement from Spain, but reinforcement came at that time. The following countries had interests to protect in the Philippines: England, Germany, France, and Japan.
President William McKinley's speech to Methodist ministers about the acquisition of the Philippines. November 1899. I have been criticized a good deal about the Philippines, but I don't deserve it. The truth is I did not want the Philippines, and when they came to us as a gift from the gods, I did not know what to do with them. I went down on my knees and prayed to Almighty God for light and guidance more than one night, and one night it came to me this way. There was nothing left for us to do but to take them all, and to educate the Filipinos and uplift and civilize and Christianize them, and by God's grace do the very best we could by them as our fellow men, for whom Christ also died, and them I went to bed and slept soundly. And the next morning I sent for the chief engineer of the War Department, our map maker, and told him to put the Philippines on the map of the United States, and there they will stay while I am president.
Bitter end. We must stand by our plighted word, by the loyalty that we have pledged to America, and by our devotion to freedom, democracy, and our liberty. We are fighting that the Filipino people may be the masters of their own destiny, and that every Filipino, not only of this generation, but of the generations to come, may be able to live in a peace and tranquility, in the full enjoyment of liberty and freedom. Your duty, our duty, is to fight and resist until the invader is driven from our land. You must not give up a foot of ground when the battle joins. You must hold in places and hold and hold. I also sent to the President of the United States my liberal revisions were done to the MBA under the Garcia-Blitzen Conference in 1956. The issue of jurisdiction in the American bases and the United States recognized the sovereignty of the Philippine government over the base lands. In 1959, Olongapo, which until the period was an American territory, was turned over to the Philippines. Other military installations, numbering 17 out of the 23 U.S. military installations, were turned over to the Philippines. On August 10, 1965, an agreement was signed with the U.S., re-announcing exclusive jurisdiction over the on-base offenses and the creation of a joint criminal jurisdiction committee. Statement of the President Harry S. Truman of the United States of America announcing an economic survey mission to the Philippines, June 29, 1950. The United States government at the request of Elpidio Quirino is sending an American economic survey mission to Manila to study and report on the present pressing economic problems. Some of the difficulties which face his country. The idea of this mission has developed out of this discussion and subsequent ones in Manila between President Quirino and Ambassador Cohen. The purpose of this mission will be to survey the entire Philippine economic situation, to make recommendation in measuring of self-help which might be undertaken by the Philippine government itself, and to make recommendation on ways in which the United States might be helpful. President Quirino has assured me that this mission will be received the fullest cooperation of the Philippine government. The Honorable Daniel W. Bell, President of the American Security and Trust Company of Washington, and formerly Under Secretary of the Treasury, has accepted the important position of Chief of the Mission. He will be my personal representative with the personal rank of Ambassador, Chief of the Mission. He will be my president and will report directly to me. The Deputy Chief of the Mission will be Major General Richard J. Marshall, President of the Virginia Military Institute, who has had many years experience in the Philippines. He will have the personal rank of minister. Work is now proceeding actively on the selection of the other members of the mission, and I hope it will be prepared to start its work early in July. I consider the mission to be of the highest importance, not only because of the results which I expect it produce, but also because it is a symbol of the half-century of intimate relationships between the Philippines and American people. It is my hope that this mission will further solidify this historic association.
Good day, sir. My name is Arenzo Duhaylungsod, and I'm reporting about the Filipino cultural heritage and other topics for analysis and discussion. So, in 1721, attack of Sulu and Iranon to dislodge the Spaniards from the port failed in spite of use of hundreds for wars, vessels, and thousands of warriors. And the Sulu then tried to have peace treaties with these enemies while dealing with the Dutch as a source of arms and ammunition. So, in the time of Spaniards, they changed their techniques in their program for evangelization. In exchange for commercial relation and treaties of alliance, they requested the sultans to accept the preaching of Christianity. So in this sovereignty was assured and no priest was to enter their territories with permission of the sultans. To the feast belong visits to Sulu sultans. Azim Udin to Manila has baptism, imprisonment, and eventual return to Sulu. So, on the pretext of restoring the Sultan of Sulu, the Spaniards at various times tried to conjure Sulu to avail. The Sulu Sultan, Muiz Udin, a brother of Aiz Udin, had be first loyalty to the Dato and the resistance was strong. So, they went as far as Sikh aimed at China and Ottoman Empire. But it was more so the British that he was able to strengthen the realm. The wars during this phase reached considerable proportion in terms of human lives lost, property destroyed. So under of hundreds of Muslims were carried into captivity with hundreds of Christian natives were captured and sold as slaves in Makassar and Java. So first with the Muslim raids to Visayas, that is some settled with collection of tribute by Spaniards went below 50%. The British invasion of Manila in 1762 created a lull in the fighting. So the Muslims still remained unconquered. They began to accelerate their commercial activities, this time concerning with the British trade. So the Spanish policy is in the middle of the 19th century was once more to conquer the Muslim. So the sultans, especially the Sulu, this time this of Christianization was not an overriding motive. So the main reason was the British and the Dutch was extended their influence in the island of Southeast Asia. So British intrigues in Sulu to secure the base of the China trade has become well known, while the Dutch were probably extending their territories in Borneo, so the Spaniards had to secure their southern frontier. In short, before the British gained secure economics and political foothold in Sulu, it was then inferred for the Spaniards to be the first. The excuse used by the Spanish government to resume war was the Samal subject of the Sulu Sultan. So the Spanish expedition of Sulu in 1851 forced the Sultan to retreat, although the Spaniards in the treaty on the Sultan accept the Spanish sovereignty. So Sulu was intended to represent faith a compelled to force foreign power to accept Spanish territorial. And the Chinese town school children affairs, it has been estimated that public subscription reached 2,500 pesetas. So the Spaniards protector of Sulu was given to the Sultan great deal of autonomy. The Sultan tried to abide as much as possible with the treaty but could not control. Meanwhile, the Spaniards and the Sultan tried to hide as much as the treaty of the could not control those dato effect of the Spaniards tried to consolidate their hold of Mindanao. A few expeditions sent to Mindanao areas to Buayan, Cotabato became Spanish outposts and Spaniards were able to build a string to fort along the Pulangi. Excuse me. The only opposing force against the War of Sultan and War of Buyawan, the Maguindanao Sultanate had been shadow on the former self. Next is by the due to study of the Spaniard policy, many interior settlements in Hulu Island still bear the mark of depopulation and the commercial activities of the Muslim were being often interrupted. So leading towards their economics backwardness, cultural activities and development which are possible under peace also suffered setbacks. However, isolation from their Muslim neighbors of Southeast Asia was also brought about because of many other Muslim principalities fell under the Dutch and the British. But it was this insulation that forced the Muslim in the Philippines to become more resourceful and progressively depend more on their own resources. And the Muslim brought in parts of North Mindanao and the Visayas should not be underestimated. So a report from 7th century, it was be within space of 30 years or less than 20,000 natives were captured in the Muslims from Spanish held territories in the Philippines. So many settlements in Visaya had to be abandoned too. But more significant that all these that were divided in the inhabitants of the archipelago, who were made in this tract is not to hate one another. The Christian natives were taught to look the Muslims in enemies of their faith. And the Muslim came to resent the racial kin who used the tools to have them conquered. Imperial policies while religious ignorance and antagonism thus feigned. Their part is dividing people in the archipelago, hopefully under an atmosphere of the greater freedom and tolerance. A concept of cultural pluralism such antagonism will eventually die out of the benefit of the national community. No longer kins but enemies. Although the Spaniards failed in conquering them, they were able to isolate them from the neighboring countries, which assured this prosperity prior to the series of wars that engaged in the Spaniards. As a result, the Muslim community suffered a regression and stagnation. When Emilio Aguinaldo proclaimed in the Independence Day in Philippines on June 12, 1898, the Muslims started their authority over the land taken by Spaniards. So they refused to recognize the authority of the revolution government. Thus conflict between the Muslims and the Christian Filipinos started. They started to look the Christian Filipinos with distrust. When the Filipino-American was escalated from Luzon in the Visayas, the Americans faced strong resistance from the natives of the islands when they learned to the Muslims harbored through distrust against the Christian Filipino. They look advantage to prevent them from joining the forces of Filipino Luzon and the Visayas. So the Americans did not respect the agreement. When the war was turning in their favor, they saw the Filipino resistance was weakening. And American victory was a matter of time. They abrogated the treaty of proceeded the conquest in Mindanao. But Marcos did not give up on the territories easily. They fought until 1913. Among these laws were Public Act 718 issued on April 1903, which voided all property and agreed Mindanao sultans unless this piece of property had been recognized and sultanized by the colonial government. Homeless families from Luzon and Visayas was encouraged to migrate to Mindanao, which intensified and hatred from the Muslim had been harboring against their Christian brothers since the Spanish colonial conflict erupted between Muslims. Christians settled as who armed with legal titles, since the Muslim and the Christian Filipinos such there as enemies. So, as a result of discrimination and marginalization, felt the indigenous Muslim population in the southern Philippine island Mindanao. An independence movement was found in Mindanao aimed to separating the Muslim majority Moro areas from the rest of the country. So in 1969, the Moro National Liberation Front founded by Nor Misuari, its armed resistance aimed at establishing a self-determining Moro identity in the Bangsamoro or a Muslim nation started 1972. From President Ferdinand Marcos to President Rodrigo Duterte, peace of Mindanao has been dreamed that remains exclusive. Each administration reached out of the Muslim insurgents, but the conflict of Mindanao seems never to end. But hope sprang internal. Those peace negotiations were conducted with end of view of reaching an agreement which would good lasting peace of Mindanao. So under the Marcos administration, peace negotiation resulted in the signing of Tripoli Agreement between MNLF and Government of the Republic of the Philippines. The negotiation with resulted of the Tripoli broken by Muammar Gaddafi, where participated a quadriparty ministerial commission member of the Islamic Conference and the Secretary General of the Organization of Islamic Conference. So this agreement granted an degree of autonomy of the Moro. This degree of autonomy was provided for under the third section provision number 16 of the agreement, which states the government of the Philippines. When Mrs. Corazon Aquino became president in 1986, her government resumed peace. Further discussion on the democratic Mindanao, however, were not possible in peace in the previous in the 1987 constitution with established regional restriction in 1989 RA 6734. An organic arc of the autonomous region Muslim Mindanao was passed. So the agreement was intended to the two stages in IA phase. I was transition period for the 3 years wherein MNLF elements would join the armed force of the Philippines, and the region would give intensive social economic rehabilitation. So Ms. Soari was elected governor of the ARMM was taken to supervise the implementation of the peace pact, but the peace of pact was acceptable to the MNLF, which standard established of the self-determining Bangsamoro territory. Ramos negotiated with MILF, exploratory between the government and the MNLF of August 1996, which commenced in January 1997. Peace agreement between the Philippines government and the secessionist Moro Islamic Liberation Front started in 1997 with the signing of the Agreement of General Restitution in July 1997 to July 1998. The peace anniversary started by Ramos was cited by the President Joseph Estrada when he adopted the policy of the Pali against the MILF in October 1999, a jihad undeclared against the Estrada administration by the MILF. So this is all out war policy is of the Estrada administration was reversed by President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. With her all peace policy against the rebel groups of the Mindanao, the peace process was revived unilaterally. Declaration of ceasefire on the part of the government was done. On March 31, 2001, Republic Act 9054 was amended to the Organic Act of the ARMM, lapsed into the law without the signature of the President of the Arroyo. So, Basilan, which included Isabela City, voted to be included in the RMM. The peace process fell apart. The military attacked the MILF day after signing. In Libya, of the axial dominant aspect in the Tripoli Agreement, the attack of triggered by intelligence report of the Abuya Sayyaf, a terrorist group in Mindanao, was being aided by MILF in terrorist activities. Malaysia interceded the formal talks between MILF and the Philippines government issued once again, which result of the between two parties of the criminal activities kidnapped from ransom groups of people. This weeks later, ceasefire was forced by March exploratory talks of Malaysia, were started in the both sides committing themselves a mutual cessation of hostilities, and the other agenda of the rounds to talks was the uncentral domain aspect in the Tripoli Agreement. This decision of the court resulted in a renewed fight in Mindanao. Peace negotiation reform from February 2010 under the Benigno Aquino III administration. So this time, the rebel group of MILF declared that they were no longer for seeking cessation from the Philippines. Despite the extent of the ceasefire, however, the MILF continued to stage attack from the Philippines. And Basilan was ambushed by the resulting of the death, 19 young soldiers and wandering to the 12 others. Still, despite the continuous violation of the ceasefire MILF, the government not resort to an all-out war against them. And then on October 15, 2012, the Aquino government assigned that framework agreement on the Bangsamoro, a document which provided a general framework from the actual peace negotiation. The government announced that the status quo is unacceptable and the Bangsamoro shall be established to replace autonomous region Muslim Mindanao. Thus, Bangsamoro become the new polity. Entity referred to the decision points of principles as of April 2012. President Aquino believed that agreement would finally seal genuine lasting peace in Mindanao. In fact, annex of the Peace of Agreements was signed at Kuala Lumpur on January 24, 2014. Signing the agreement were Mariam Colonel Ferrer and Muhangar Iqbal, Chief Negotiator from Philippine Government and as Chief Negotiator MILF respectively. On March 27, 2014, the comprehensive agreement of the Bangsamoro was paved way from the creational new Muslim autonomous entity called the Bangsamoro under law approved by the Philippine Congress was signed in Manila. The agreement called of the Muslim role parts of the Southern Exchange the deactivation of rebel forces by the MILF. MILF forces would turn into their firmness to the third party if they selected by MILF at the Philippine government. So the congressman infamous Mampasan tragedy happened on January 2015 when 44 members of Special Action Force or SAF of the Philippines, 24 individuals including women and children lost their lives during the execution of Oplan Exodus. This was the operation of the PNP against Zulkiflin bin Her or Marwan, a suspected Malaysian terrorist and his close aide based Usman. The operation was carried by the SAF without proper coordination with Joint Coordinating Committee for the Cessation Hostilities and the several peacekeeping bodies composed by the elements from both of the armed forces of the Philippines and the MILF to ensure that the terms of the peace according to these hostilities are avoided while peace talks are going on. In June 2016, President Rodrigo Roa Duterte took over the reign of government from President Benigno Aquino III. Prior to his election to the presidency, the former Davao City Mayor promised that he would address the historical injustice against the Bangsamoro by expediting the passage of BBL. A new Bangsamoro Transition Commission was created in 2016, tasked to draft a new version of BBL, which could be exclusive to NMALF will be respective the government of the indigenous people. Which new version of new BBL was about to be submitted, the Marawi signed happened. 5 months, Marawi was bombed and destroyed almost infrastructure in the city. The Maoti group launched massive attacks on the military force government. Martial law has been declared in Mindanao. As a result of this incident, the new BBL was suffered lukewarm support from the Philippine legislators. The government of the Republic of the Philippines led by Honorable Carmelo Z. Barbero, Undersecretary from National Defense and Civilization. The second areas of autonomous Muslim in Southern Philippines shall comprise the following are the Basilan, Solo, Tawi-Tawi, Zamboanga del Sur, Zamboanga Norte, North Cotabato, Maguindanao, Sultan Kudarat, Lanao del Norte, Lanao del Sur, Davao del Sur, South Cotabato, and Palawan. The number one foreign policy should be of the competence of the central government of the Philippines. The second is the national defense affair shall be concerned to the central authority provided the arrangement of the joining force of the Moro National Liberation from the Philippines Armed Forces by discussion later. In the area of autonomy of South Philippines, the right to set up their own counts which implemented Islamic Sharia laws, the Muslims shall be represented all the courts. So the mixed committee shall be composed of the representative of the central government. And a final agreement concerning setting up the autonomy referred to in the first. The fact of those communities, Muslim and Christian, live together in neighbors without killing one another shows that ended of the religious divided categories of people into irreconcilable hostile blocks. It is true that the violence accumulation rocks territory of the other communities where Muslim and a Christian live by the side of Marawi City. Basilan and Sulu were Muslims predominate, but it is true that the one yet of the her Muslim majority opposing the Christian minority in Tawi-Tawi unless that is the best kept secret in this country. Our father Abraham, moreover, I must most optimistic the sooner or later the Christian and the Muslim of this country. We will realize that we belong to the country and are descended from the same father Abraham. And the two religious incentives separating us should bind into the same supreme being and lead us to the respect one another. After all, Muslim to do proclaim that Islam is the religion of peace, and all Christians believe that Christians is religion to of love. Is that be so? I have no reason to doubt that it is the only question that time belong. We will be embracing one another as children of the same God and as a brothers sisters from same race and same nation. I pray with all my heart that we will go to the situation before more lives lost and there get worse. So that's my report and good day, sir.